The congressional clash, when Jasmine Crockett silenced Matt Gaetz. The House Oversight Committee chamber throbbed with tension that Tuesday afternoon. Bright camera lights glared against the polished wood panels as C-SPAN's live feed captured every angle. Reporters from CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and dozens of other outlets packed the press gallery, fingers poised above keyboards, ready to document what would become one of the year's most explosive political moments. At the center of the room sat Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida, his trademark smirk fixed firmly in place. The 41-year-old Republican had built his reputation on confrontation, loud, unyielding, and always calculated for maximum attention. Across from him sat Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas, the freshman Democrat whose sharp intellect and fearless questioning had made her one of Congress's rising stars. A 43-year-old civil rights attorney and former public defender, Crockett exuded calm focus. Her burgundy blazer and composed expression concealed the quiet intensity of someone who had spent years in Dallas courtrooms facing far greater hostility than anything politics could throw her way. For the first hour, the hearing followed routine lines, budget discussions, document requests, and procedural exchanges that rarely make headlines. But everything changed when Crockett asked a straightforward question about missing documents. It was a professional inquiry, the kind that keeps oversight hearings on track. Yet instead of responding, Gaetz, who had been scrolling through his phone, looked up with a smirk that reporters instantly recognized. "Oh, you're asking me about documents?" he said, voice dripping with condescension. He leaned back in his chair, hands clasped behind his head. "Perhaps if you spent less time worrying about your fake eyelashes and more time reading the materials we've already submitted, you'd know the answer." The air went still. For a moment, no one breathed. Then came the uneasy laughter. A few snickers from his Republican colleagues exchanged glances, quiet chuckles. On the Democratic side, faces froze in disbelief and anger. Gaetz, enjoying the discomfort he created, leaned back further, his grin widening. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez immediately rose. "Point of order," she said sharply. "That is entirely inappropriate and sexist commentary. It has no place in a congressional hearing." Committee Chairman James Comer, a Republican from Kentucky, waved her off. The gentleman from Florida will watch his language and proceed. But Jasmine Crockett had no intention of letting it pass. She sat perfectly still, eyes locked on Gaetz. The cameras zoomed in. Years of courtroom discipline steadied her. She knew when to speak and when to wait. Timing, she had learned, was everything. Across the press gallery, reporters typed furiously. They sensed a moment about to erupt, the perfect viral exchange. Gaetz versus Crockett, arrogance versus composure. Yet none of them could have predicted what was about to unfold. To understand its impact, one must understand who they were. Matt Gaetz did not emerge from obscurity. Born into privilege as the son of wealthy businessman and Florida Senate President Don Gaetz, he had inherited both political access and entitlement. Educated at Florida State University and the College of William and Mary, Gaetz entered the Florida legislature in 2010 and Congress by 2016. His political persona was carefully crafted, brash, loyal to Donald Trump, and relentlessly provocative. His frequent Fox News appearances and viral soundbites made him a star on the far right, but his career was dogged by scandal. He had been the sole vote against an anti-human trafficking bill in 2017. By 2021, he faced federal scrutiny for alleged sex trafficking of a 17-year-old, an investigation linked to his associate Joel Greenberg's guilty plea. Though Gaetz denied wrongdoing and was never charged, the shadow lingered. Even many Republicans found him exhausting, though his loyal base adored his combativeness. Jasmine Crockett's path could not have been more different. Born in St. Louis in 1981, she worked her way through college and law school without family wealth or connections. As a civil rights attorney in Dallas, she defended clients who could not afford representation, specializing in criminal defense and constitutional rights. Her reputation grew not from television appearances, but from courtroom victories earned through grit and preparation. In 2020, Crockett entered the Texas House of Representatives, quickly standing out for her precision and moral clarity. She helped lead the walkout against restrictive voting laws and demanded accountability during Texas's deadly power grid failure. By 2022, she had won election to Congress, succeeding the legendary Eddie Bernice Johnson in Texas's 30th District. On the Oversight Committee, she came armed with research, resolve, and the understanding that women, especially black women, are too often underestimated. That day, Gaetz's insult was not simply personal. It was emblematic of a broader struggle, the treatment of women of color in power, and whether ridicule would continue to substitute for reasoned debate. For Gaetz, this was performance. For Crockett, it was principle. As Comer tried to move on, the murmurs swelled. Gaetz leaned back, visibly pleased with himself. "Let's proceed to the next question," the chairman urged. Crockett's voice cut through the noise. "Point of personal privilege, Mr. Chairman." Comer sighed. "The gentlewoman is recognized." She turned to Gaetz, her tone even, her expression unflinching. "I'm simply curious," she began, almost conversationally, "since we're now discussing people's appearances." The room quieted instantly. Reporters stopped typing. Even the air seemed to pause. "If we are establishing new committee standards that allow commentary on physical features," she continued, "then I'd like to know whether it's now appropriate to observe that someone appears as if they were created by artificial intelligence." A ripple of laughter broke through the silence. Gaetz's smirk faltered. "Or," Crockett added, leaning slightly forward, "that someone might be wearing enough makeup to conceal things they'd rather we not see." Gasps echoed. Gaetz's grin evaporated. His face flushed crimson. "And if we're heading down that road, Mr. Gaetz," she concluded, her tone sharpening, "then perhaps this committee should discuss why a man under federal investigation for trafficking feels entitled to mock anyone else's professionalism." The chamber exploded. Democrats erupted in applause. Republicans shouted protests. Chairman Comer slammed his gavel, so furiously it nearly splintered. Gaetz sprang to his feet, pointing across the table, his voice breaking. "That is completely out of line. That is a smear." But the cameras had already captured it. The moment the smirk vanished, the viral clip spread within minutes. By nightfall, it dominated every major network and trended across platforms. For years, Gaetz had relied on mockery to silence opponents. That day, Jasmine Crockett reminded him and the nation that composure can be the most powerful form of retaliation. Jasmine Crockett's calm storm, the day Congress stopped laughing. "That is a lie, Mr. Chairman." "She must be censured immediately," shouted Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, her voice cutting through the uproar like glass. Across the table, Representative Jasmine Crockett sat perfectly still, hands folded, expression unshaken. She had delivered her counterpunch with surgical precision, and now watched the fallout unfold. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez rose from her seat, clapping once for emphasis. "No, no, no," she declared. "He started this. He attacked her first. You can't let him dish it out, and then cry when someone responds." Laughter and shouting erupted again. She just accused a sitting member of Congress of a crime. Greene yelled, "That's defamation." Representative Jerry Connolly, a senior Democrat from Virginia, chuckled. "Oh, now we care about decorum?" After the fake eyelash comment. Partisan lines formed instantly. Republicans demanding Crockett's punishment, Democrats rallying around her right to respond. The hearing dissolved into chaos. Yet outside that chamber, something much larger was already taking shape. Within minutes, clips of Crockett's composed retort spread like wildfire across social media. On X, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, millions watched the moment Gaetz's grin disappear. Memes, remixes, and parody edits flooded timelines. Hashtags hashtag Jasmine Crockett and hashtag Matt Gaetz trended worldwide within 5 minutes. Inside the committee room, Chairman James Comer banged his gavel, trying to regain control. "The gentleman's time has expired. We will take a brief recess." "Mr. Chairman," Crockett interjected calmly, "I'd like to reserve my remaining time for later questioning. I still have questions for Mr. Gaetz about those documents he claims I haven't read. I'd love to review them line by line." I'm sure he'd appreciate that level of detailed scrutiny. It was a brilliant pivot. She wasn't just defending herself. She was reclaiming the substance of the hearing, turning Gaetz's personal insult into a professional trap. The Florida congressman looked shell-shocked. His trademark swagger evaporated. Representative Nancy Mace, a Republican often critical of Gaetz, covered her mouth to hide a grin. Even a few GOP staffers struggled not to laugh. The power dynamic had flipped completely. By the time Comer called recess, the exchange had already been viewed millions of times. News networks broke into coverage. Political talk shows rearranged their lineups. What began as a committee squabble was now a national event. Out in the hallway, the media swarmed. Gaetz, flanked by aides, tried to regain control of the narrative. "This is another example of Democrats' lack of civility," he said stiffly. But the bravado that usually carried him was gone. When a reporter mentioned a federal investigation Crockett had alluded to, he snapped, "That's a baseless smear, and you know it. This is why people despise the media." Then came his fatal mistake. Gaetz took to Twitter. Jasmine Crockett just proved she's all style, no substance. Can't answer basic questions, so she resorts to personal attacks. Sad. The backlash was immediate. Replies poured in. "You literally started with fake eyelashes. You mocked her looks and got destroyed. Take the loss." Matt Gaetz talking about substance is peak irony. Meanwhile, Crockett faced the press with poise. Standing in the hallway, posture relaxed, she answered questions with quiet confidence. "Do you regret your response to Congressman Gaetz?" a CNN reporter asked. Crockett smiled faintly. "I regret that some members believe it's acceptable to make sexist remarks instead of answering oversight questions. But no, I don't regret standing up for myself or for every woman who's been dismissed or mocked in a professional setting. We deserve better, and so do the American people," a Fox News reporter pressed. "But you brought up his ongoing investigation." "I mentioned publicly available facts," she replied smoothly. "If he wants to attack my professionalism based on my appearance, it's fair to question the professionalism of someone under federal investigation. That's not a smear, that's a record. And if he doesn't like it, perhaps he shouldn't start conversations about personal attacks." Her tone remained steady, her confidence effortless. The contrast with Gaetz's defensive outburst was striking. Then came the question that sealed her moment. "What do you say to those who think this kind of exchange is beneath Congress?" asked an MSNBC correspondent. Crockett's expression softened. "You know what's beneath Congress? Making sexist comments about your colleagues. Refusing to answer oversight questions. Using mockery to dodge accountability. I came here to do my job, to ask serious questions about how our government operates. When someone tries to silence me by commenting on my appearance, I won't smile and stay quiet. That's not lowering discourse. That's rejecting a double standard where men can be aggressive, but women are told to stay polite." She paused, then delivered the line that every outlet would replay that night. Matt Gaetz started a fight he wasn't prepared to finish, and that's on him, not me. Reporters shouted follow-ups, but Crockett was finished. She thanked them and returned to the hearing room, leaving journalists scrambling to post updates. When the session resumed, the energy had shifted completely. Republicans who'd laughed earlier now sat silent. They knew the optics were disastrous. Gaetz scrolled through his phone, grimacing as criticism flooded in. Crockett, meanwhile, resumed questioning witnesses with calm precision. Focused, professional, and every bit the capable lawmaker her critics had underestimated. By evening, the story dominated the airwaves. CNN ran a headline, "Gaetz's sexist attack backfires spectacularly." Even Fox News covered it cautiously. On MSNBC, Rachel Maddow opened her show with a detailed timeline, contrasting Gaetz's pattern of remarks about women with Crockett's background as a civil rights attorney. But Crockett's real victory was digital. Online, millions shared her composure, her poise, and her sharp retort. TikTok captions read, "She stayed calm and ended his career in one sentence." Even some conservative commentators admitted Gaetz's remark was indefensible. By night's end, Jasmine Crockett had done what few first-term lawmakers ever achieve. She had transformed a moment of disrespect into a defining act of strength. Matt Gaetz tried to humiliate Representative Jasmine Crockett, but the attempt backfired spectacularly. Late-night hosts mocked his meltdown, with Jimmy Kimmel calling a toddler trying to intimidate a trial lawyer. Crockett's calm, sharp response made her a national hero, inspiring millions of women and sparking new discussions about power, gender, and respect in politics. Her following soared, donations surged, and even opponents praised her professionalism. Meanwhile, Gaetz faced renewed scrutiny and ridicule. What began as a clash in Congress became a cultural turning point. Proof that underestimating strong women is always a losing strategy.